I can't claim with 100% certainty that the following happened because I wasn't there. I don't know exactly what was going on behind the scenes. But remember, the screenplay to Mad Max 3 was never meant to be a Mad Max film. It was most likely a script that had been sitting around for a few years, and the hack writer finally found Doug Mitchell, the only unfamiliar name attached to Mad Max 3. Mitchell, being solely a producer or glorified investor, surely knew of the commercial success of the previous Mad Max films and drew some parallels to the half-assed script in his hands. He maybe figured that because the setting was similar, the main character's personal life was again unimportant to the main plot, and it ended with a big chase sequence, he could repackage this as another Mad Max and rake in a lot of cash off an already well-established sequel. So Mitchell probably got George Miller on the phone, told him he'd give him a $12 million budget, which was literally 15 times that of the first two movies, and that all they'd have to do is touch up the script and start filming. How could he turn it down? Well, he could start by having a little artistic fucking integrity. But I've used a lot of maybes, probablys, and most likelies in that scenario. I can't be sure of what happened, but I can be sure of the fact that several aspects of this movie point to the idea that this was originally supposed to be something else. The first glaring continuity error between the first two Mad Max films and Beyond Thunderdome is radiation. Within the first 5 minutes of the film, when Max is walking into a town, a sleazy looking old man is selling water. Max takes out a Geiger counter, a device for detecting radiation, and determines the water is contaminated. The man walks away and says,
"What's a little fallout, huh? Have a nice day!"
Wait, so did a nuclear war happen? It's pretty clear in the first two Mad Max films that there's no nuclear war.
Without fuel, they were nothing. They built a house of straw. The thundering machine sputtered and stopped.
So am I supposed to believe nukes flew between the periods of Mad Max 2 and 3? After governments around the world have already collapsed? If everybody was fighting over gasoline, then how would nuking and radiating areas where you can get gas be logical? And don't try telling me the radiation didn't come from nuclear warfare. The final scene that essentially confirms this is when Max meets a tribe of lost children with cave paintings that tell the story of how they got to where they are. These cave paintings show an explosion that looks just like a mushroom cloud, and the children tell the story as if that explosion was the apocalypse.
It's poxiclips full of pain.
I can almost be sure that a nuke went off, but because the oldest of the lost children are around the age of 25 remembering back on this explosion, that means the nuke had to have been dropped at least 20 years ago, before the events of Mad Max 2. Not only does this not fit in with the timeline, but the cause of the war is flimsy as well. The children remember flying away from the burning city on an airplane piloted by a random man. In Mad Max 2, we know the depletion of gasoline is what caused the fighting and decay to start. So how did this random man obtain enough gasoline to fuel an entire plane's engine, enough to get to nearly the opposite end of Australia, from Sydney to the Great Victoria? Because clearly in this original script, gasoline wasn't a problem, but the script depended too much on the nuclear war aspect, so they couldn't change that to fit turning it into a Mad Max movie. Another thing that didn't fit, that they tried to jam in anyway, was the gyro captain. In Mad Max 2, Max meets a fun character whose name in the script is only Gyro Captain, because his name is never said on screen, and he pilots a makeshift gyrocopter. He starts out as a scavenger who's trying to rob Max, but Max gets the better of him and ends up using the Gyro Captain to find the camp that has gasoline. Later the Gyro Captain comes to the camp with him, helps out Max, and they become friends. The Gyro Captain even calls himself and Max partners. Now in Mad Max 3, the same actor is playing a character who still has the same appearance, pilots a small plane, and starts out by robbing Max, only this time neither character seem to know each other. Based on the ending of Mad Max 2, the Gyro Captain had no business being anywhere near where Max is in Mad Max 3. He also has no business still trying to rob people, especially not Max. And by the end of the film, they make direct eye contact and Max even threatens to murder him.
You!
Me?
You. It's your lucky day.
It is?
Uh-huh. You got a plane.
I have?
It might just save your life.
It will?
This is clearly a different character, But why cast the same actor to play a similar character? Because the script wasn't Mad Max, but it had a pilot, and they knew the audience would remember the gyro captain, and that would help create the illusion that you're watching Mad Max 3. But what you're actually watching is no-name retard stumbles around nuked cartoon world. Another interesting thing that points to this is Max's name is never said once in the film. Now, Max's name was never important, but it would kind of make sense to hear just one person call him Max, or at least ask for his name. But it's as if they couldn't find a place to force it into the script, whereas if they weren't willing to change the script they already had. Max is only ever referred to as Raggedy Man by Timmy Turner, as Captain Walker by the Peter Pan Boys, and as the Man with No Name by the people of the Thunderdome. If you're still not convinced that this is a repurposed screenplay to a different movie, then that's fine. I can actually see where they drew all the similarities that encouraged them to make this into a Mad Max film. In fact, the first 30 minutes of the film, despite all the cringeworthy attempts at comedy and the blatant plot holes, I was into it and along for the ride. The concept for the first act of the movie is actually pretty cool. It's been 15 years since Mad Max 2, and Max finds a town that's turned itself into something more than just a camp. It's a town that's trying to re-establish society, and for the most part, it's doing it successfully. But with trying to establish a government, an economy, and laws, comes conflicts of political interest. So the current leader of this town uses a skilled stranger, Max, to help settle her dispute. Sounds decent, right? Too bad the execution of all this is insultingly stupid, and after the first act the story devolves into something else entirely, and from that point the general plot and the craft of the film are working together to truly numb your mind. So let's just say this was always meant to be a Mad Max film, and George Miller actually wrote it. It doesn't change the fact that the movie makes no logical sense within its own narrative. Even if you ignore Mad Max 1 and 2, Beyond Thunderdome is still a train wreck. So I'll proceed just as if Mad Max 1 and 2 never happened. Get ready to overanalyze one of the most pointless movies ever made. Mad Max 3 Beyond Plot Holes starts with Max moving along through the desert in a Jeep that's been turned into a wagon. Immediately, a plane swoops down, piloted by the new version of the Gyro Captain, and knocks out Max. Then Gyro Captain 2.0 gets on the wing of the plane, lets his 6-year-old co-pilot take the wheel, and jumps off into the seat of Max's wagon. So right off the bat, we have to accept this movie isn't grounded in any sense of realism like the first two movies. We're in cartoon land where you can hit somebody in the head with a moving plane and not kill them. So Gyro Captain 2.0 rides off with all Max's belongings. Max gets up, follows the trail, and eventually is led to Bartertown. When he enters the town, he's told by a man called the Collector that he can only enter if he's trying to trade something. Max tells him he's looking for Gyro Captain 2.0 and that he's willing to trade his skills for entrance. The Collector doubts the usefulness of Max's skills and insults him, so Max aggressively grabs him by the collar and pulls his gun out on a guard. What? He lives in a harsh environment where all that matters is survival, so he walks into an unknown area and pulls out his gun on the first person he sees just for talking smack. He's only saved by the lucky fact that the people who run this town have been looking for an action movie badass to help them with something, and I guess being an idiot and waving his gun around proves something to them. If they weren't looking for somebody, which Max couldn't have possibly known, then what was his plan? Murder every single person in town? There was no plan. Only 7 minutes into the movie and we're already experiencing typical action film schlock where the hero's badass don't take no for an answer attitude precedes all logic of social interactions. If he's been acting this recklessly for 15 years in a world like this, he'd have been dead a long time ago. Luckily for Max, instead of having his intestines removed and being thrown back out into the desert as an empty body cavity, he's offered a job. 24 hours of his life for all of his belongings back. He agrees, and he's led to our first failed attempt at comedy. He's forced to remove all weapons on his person before entering the town, so he starts out by taking 2 weapons we've already seen, followed by 16 more weapons. The whole time he's taking them out slowly, everybody else is looking at him like, whoa, check out this badass. And there's this awkward atmosphere like I'm supposed to be laughing. This type of gag can work in the right context. In fact, I know I've seen this before and I found it amusing, but it has to be in a facetious type movie like The Naked Gun. If it's gonna be something played straight and serious, there has to be setup to the joke that would explain why he'd have this many weapons on him. The whole time I'm supposed to be laughing, I'm just thinking, why did he have all these weapons? weapons on him when he was just wandering the desert? He only has 2 arms. Why does he need more than 2 guns on him at a time? It can't possibly be practical to weigh yourself down with a bunch of weapons while traveling a hot desert. The response to that would be, you're not supposed to think about it, it's just supposed to be fun. If I'm not supposed to take this seriously, then how does the movie expect me to get invested in the action and plot that follows? If this isn't an action movie with consistency, and this isn't a wacky comedy, then what is it? Who is this for? What am I supposed to feel? You can have comedy in a serious film. There's actually some really funny moments in Mad Max 2, but they're all grounded in reality. You have to keep a specific tone to your story, and that's the main problem with this movie. It has the tone of a teenage boy writing a western, and it's all over the place. I have no idea what I'm supposed to take seriously and what I'm not. So 8 minutes into the film, I'm already distanced from the characters and story and taking everything in the plot with a grain of salt.